Hi book lovers. First things first, I'm blonde. Well, kind of, but I do feel like I'm a blonde. I just came from the hairdresser and I can't stop looking at it, guys. I do love it, but I also do have to get used to it. But that is just a little side note. I'm just still very excited about it. So I wanted to tell you guys that welcome back, or welcome if you're new here. We're not going to talk about my hair today. We're actually here to talk about enemies to lovers romances. And I'm actually choosing just to do romances for this video because I used to be someone who only or mainly read romances. I only stepped into fantasy I think not even quite 2 years ago, but before that I only ever read romances, and I hated when people said, oh, enemies to lovers is not really a thing in romances, you can only find that in fantasy. And hear me out. I understand why people say that, and I understand that, you know, enemies to lovers trope in fantasy is different, is way more intense, and is truer of the form of enemies to lovers. But you know what? There's still enemies to lovers in romances, and not every one of us wants to read fantasy. I don't know, I just don't like I don't share the opinion that there's no enemies to lovers in contemporary romance. There is, so I wanted to give you guys recommendations for that because it is my favorite trope. I read way more enemies to lovers than friends to lovers, so I had a really hard time narrowing down some books for you guys, so there will definitely be a part 2, a part 3, and in other videos I will also include fantasies and also dark romances. But you know, I wanted this video to really just highlight the enemies to lovers trope for contemporary romance because I just didn't like when people said that it's not a thing in romances, and I'm here to tell you guys, no, there is a thing. And obviously in contemporary romance they are not out there to actually kill each other, but I just like enemies to lovers because it's just about the tension. Like, I love it when they don't like each other, but at the same time they're so attracted to the other person and they just want to jump their bones, but they hate each other. And if you're like me and you want some good enemies to lovers recommendations, then keep on watching. Also, can you tell that I like fall? As I said, it was very hard to narrow down, but I have to remember I can always make more videos. And also, if you want more of these type of videos, then please let me know in the comments and give this video a like. But let's jump into the first one. And in the first one, you can't tell me this is not enemies to lovers. This is From Lukov with Love by Mariana Zapata, and this is one of the best enemies to lovers contemporary romances out there. Jasmine and Lukov are both figure skaters and they've never liked each other. They're both in competition, they're also not very friendly towards each other, and our main character is definitely on a grumpy side, but our main character is also frustrated because she's in her last years of like being able to really do something with her figure skating. There are always newer, younger figure skaters she has to compete with. And when Lukov's partner gets injured and asks Jasmine to be his new partner for figure skating, she's very skeptical, but she also knows that Lukov is just so good and she could win stuff with him together. But let me tell you guys, they hate each other and working together is not gonna be easy. But that also means a lot of forced proximity and they get to know each other better, and maybe there's more than hate. And I know Mariana Zapata is known for her slow burn. If you're also apprehensive because she's so known for her slow burn, since this is a shorter book, and I just love the tension in here so much that this is totally worth giving a shot. My next romance is one of my favorites, and that is The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker. This is just everything for me. I love this series, and it's not perfect, but I don't know, I even love it with all its flaws. That's when you know it's true love. But this is about our main character Kala, and she doesn't really have a relationship with her dad. She hasn't seen him in I think like 15 or 20 years because he lives in Alaska and she lives in Toronto, but he asks her to come over for the summer. So she goes to Alaska, and literally in the middle of nowhere, and the only way to really get there is by a little bush plane. And the guy that's flying the plane is the bush pilot Jonah, and they don't start on good terms. They really don't like each other because I would say they also just have a lot of prejudice against each other, but this is just so good. I love their dynamic, I love their tension, and I also really love this book, not just for the romance but also the side plots, and I just think this is a lot more than just a romance. It's very emotional. I also really enjoyed the setting, and I know this technically I think plays in the summertime, I'm not 100% sure, but I think so. But also since this is Alaska, and just the feel and the vibe of this is very cozy and gives me very like autumn winter vibes. This is perfect to read now. A good way to play out the enemies to lovers story is if you force those characters that really don't like each other into a marriage. And this happens in Unfortunately Yours by Tessa Bailey. This is technically the second one in her little duology, but they're both standalone novels, so you don't have to read the other one in order to read this one. He's trying to be a winemaker, and she comes from a family that's always been in the wine business, and she really criticizes his wine. And I would say he just sees her as this brat, and they really don't get along. But because of some circumstances, they kind of make this pact to marry each other for their own benefits. They both gain something out of it. And that also means spending a lot of time together. And even though they hate each other, they're also very attracted to the other person. And one thing that Tessa Bailey does very well is definitely some hot, spicy scenes. So if you're in for like a fun, good time with enemies to lovers, then I definitely recommend this one. Next up, I have a sapphic romance, and that is Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring Blake. And this is technically a bit more like a rivals to lovers story, but you know, it still gives the enemies to lovers feeling because they both have to work on this project and they have very different visions for the house flip they're doing. And Astrid is kind of this perfectionist, but she's also the way because her mother always expects Astrid to do her best and to have no flaws. And Jordan is pretty much the opposite. She's very much going with the flow, way more spontaneous. And they're also doing this house flip for like a TV show. So when the producers see that there's tension between these two, they're actually asking them to amp it up. So yeah, they dislike each other, but even after getting to know the other person, they have to pretend to dislike each other so much for the cameras. And I really like that pretend part because it added some tension to their relationship and their like getting to know each other phase. Next up, I'm going to recommend a book by one of my favorite authors, and I would say that most of her books are kind of on the enemies to lovers side or have like a similar dynamic, and I had a hard time to choose one book by her, but I decided on recommending you guys Love Unwritten by the Lauren Asher. And I think this one just did a very good job of enemies to lovers story, where at the beginning you could really just tell that they are forced together, but they don't like each other. And I think that's often what other people criticize about the trope in contemporary romance, that it's maybe just like a tiny misunderstanding, or they don't even know each other and that's why they don't like each other. But as soon as they talk once, they're like, oh, I actually like that other person. But not so much in this one. Ellie's the nanny for Raphael's son, and he pretty much keeps her around because his son loves his nanny so much, but he's also kind of jealous of their relationship because he's dealing with a lot, and right now he doesn't have the best relationship with his son, but he wants to work on that as well. And you can just tell that he's been burned by love, and he's just very bitter, I would say, and therefore he's also quite rude to Ellie. And obviously Ellie doesn't like him because he's not the nicest person to be around. So when they start out, they really don't like each other, but they also have this holiday plan and they don't want to cancel because of Nico the son. They want to do it for him. So you have a lot of forced proximity here as well, and this is definitely also more of a slow burn, but I really loved this one. And I just also loved the change that happened in both of these characters. There was a lot of character growth, and I feel like that also helped in their relationship, and it was not just all like a misunderstanding. They were really not nice at the beginning to each other, especially Raphael towards Ellie, but you know, he still was a great book boyfriend by the end. My next recommendation I feel like is more of a classic, and that is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. Olive and Ethan really don't like each other, but their siblings are getting married. They're the best man and the maid of honor, and they can try to be civil to each other for a day. But then at the wedding, everyone gets sick, even the bride and the groom, except for Olive and Ethan because they didn't have the same food. And the married couple actually won a honeymoon to Hawaii, and they're like, oh, we can't go now because we got sick, but hey, do you not maybe want to go because you're the only ones who didn't get sick? And because it's Hawaii, obviously they want to go, and they're like, okay, let's just do it. And they also kind of have to pretend to be together because it's like a honeymoon they won, but they still hate each other and they have to spend a lot of time together now. So I really liked their banter in this one. This was just a very good, solid romance. My next recommendation comes from an interconnected series where I would say they're actually all kind of enemies to lovers stories, but I'm just gonna recommend you the one that I enjoyed the most, or where I would say it is even more enemies to lovers, but really it's the third one in the interconnected series. They are all amazing. They were all 5 stars for me, so you can begin from the first one, which is A Deal with the Devil. But the one that I want to talk about in today's video is The Devil You Know. In this one we have Ben and Gamma, and they're work rivals because they're both lawyers at this firm. And I think it was Gamma who came into the firm, and the first thing that Ben did was basically steal clients from her, or the other way around, I can't remember. But Ben is the client stealer, and they just have very different opinion when it comes to their work ethic. And you know, Ben is this cocky, arrogant guy, and they just don't get along. But then they get forced to work on a case together, and they have to spend a lot of time together, a lot of work days, but also weekends. And yeah, there's just a lot of fire in this book. And I think Elizabeth O'Rourke is just truly so amazing at writing really deep and emotional romances, but they're also fun, they're also very spicy, and they're usually around the 300-page mark. And I'm just amazed how well the story and everything is written in not like 500 pages. So if you want a very good, solid romance, especially with enemies to lovers, check her out. As I said, I think the series is called The Grumpy Devils, and they all kind of have the enemies to lovers dynamic, so I would definitely recommend them all. The next book I have here is Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey oh my god, I don't think I've ever said this name out loud. Casey McQuiston? I hope I'm saying that right. However, this is a great book, and maybe slightly fairy tale-esque, because we have the Prince of England and America's first son who really hate each other, and because of their dislike, it's actually hurting their families and the image. So, you know, the PR team is coming up with some damage control, a plan how to revolve this and make it a different story. And they're like, oh, Alex and Prince Henry are actually best friends, so they orchestrate a lot of like friendship dates between these two for like publicity reasons. But you know, plot twist, by spending time with each other, they kind of start to actually like each other, and maybe, oh wow, they're also attracted to the other person. Crazy, I know, but that is Red, White and Royal Blue for you guys. My next book recommendation I don't have with me because I lent it to a friend of mine, and that is Love Theoretically by Ellie Hazelwood. And I think I would say this is my favorite Ellie Hazelwood book, at least when it comes to her contemporary romances, although I like pretty much all her books. On a professional level, they're already enemies since he is an experimental physicist and she is a theoretically physicist. And not gonna lie, my first thought was Big Bang Theory with Leonard and Sheldon. And I think the plot of this one was also quite unique because she has actually been fake dating his brother, but then also Elsie wants to start a job and Jack is actually the one on the hiring committee, and she doesn't just dislike him because he is an experimental physicist, but he also published something in the past where he kind of mocked the theoretical physicist. I just really loved this one. I loved that Elsie was such a people pleaser and Jack could just look through her, and he was so protective also over her and just really good at like truly looking at her and what she wants and needs and not what she thinks everyone else wants and needs from her. And yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and I think it's a great enemies to lover story. My next recommendation is Book Lovers by Emily Henry, and I actually wasn't even interested in reading this one, but my boyfriend actually gifted this for me, and I was like, okay, fine, I just might read it now. And once I started this, I couldn't put it down. I loved this one so much. I think it was really great. I really loved our main character, and I also really liked the enemies to lovers dynamics here. Nora is a literary agent and Charlie is an editor, and they haven't seen eye to eye in the past and they just don't really get along. But over the summer, they actually bump into each other in the same small town. And since this is a small town, they bump into each other quite a few times. And again, plot twist, the more time they spend with each other, they actually also kind of discover good sides of the other person. Emily Henry is known to be a very good writer, and also that her romances are not just focused on the romance, but you do have other side plots that give more character to the story. If you are scared to go into this because you think it's not enough romance, I usually like a romance just to be a romance, but I think that these side plots just really add to the story and they don't take away from the romance. The romance is still in the forefront. But yeah, if you want to try out Emily Henry and one of your favorite tropes is enemies to lovers, I definitely recommend Book Lovers. Alright, we're actually coming to one of my last recommendations, and they're actually from the same author, so I'm kind of talking about both of them at the same time here. But the author is Anna Huang, and I think she is very great at writing a good enemies to lovers story. And the first one I have here is Twisted Hate from the Twisted series. This is also an interconnected series, so you don't have to read all of them, but of course, if you want the full experience, read it from the first book onwards. This is the third one, and I really enjoyed this story. I feel like some people loved it, some people hated it. I'm on the side that I loved this one, but I would also say in general, when it comes to Anna Huang, you know, if you read all of her books back to back, then they kind of blend in to be a bit similar, especially the heroes. But if you spread them out, they're definitely really good. They're a bit more on maybe like the fan fiction side, I would say. It's easy to get addicted to one of these books and read them so fast, but I wouldn't say that they have no faults. For example, like in this one, I really liked this, but I also kind of hated the third act breakup. I just want to have a fun and good time with these ones. And also, the spice in especially Twisted Hate was some of the best spice I've ever read. And in this one you follow Josh and Jules, and Jules is the best friend of Josh's sister. So they've never liked each other, they have a lot of prejudice against each other. But again, we get some forced proximity because they have to work on a case together. He's a doctor and she's a lawyer, and maybe from a Twisted Hate can come a great love story. The other book I wanted to recommend by Anna Huang is King of Wrath. This is a different series by her, and this is the first one in that series. Again, they're all interconnected standalones. This one is a marriage of convenience, and most often when it's marriage of convenience, you know, they don't marry for love, but for other reasons. And in this one, it's actually a bit more of an arranged marriage, because our main character, Dante, is a billionaire who comes from a very rich, old money family. And you know, sometimes you just have to marry into that kind of status, because even if you have money, but it's new money, it's not the same as old money. That's at least how Vivian's father thinks, and he arranges this marriage between Dante and Vivian. And Dante is very pissed off by that because Vivian's dad kind of forced his hand in that matter, and therefore Dante isn't very happy about his bride and also not very kind to her, and Vivian obviously doesn't want to be in that position. But being in this marriage also means they have to live together, and we have some forced proximity, they spend time with each other, and I feel like, you know, you know how it goes. There might be some love in here. Like, this is the last book I'm recommending, you guys, and I feel like it's the same story over and over, and it kind of is, but they're also all very different, you know? You know what I mean. But yeah, these were all my enemies to lovers romance recommendation for this video. Again, I have so many more, so if you want to see more, definitely give this video a like and also leave a comment. As I explained in the beginning, I really wanted to focus on romances and wanted to give those people who don't read other genre the opportunity to find some good enemies to lovers recommendations. I hope you found a new enemies to lovers romance book for you. And yeah, leave a like and also subscribe for more bookish content in the future. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!